I am excited to welcome Danny to the stage. When I read the description of Danny's research firm, it is a passion for questioning the status quo when it comes to people management practices. Now, if that's not something to get curious about Danny's company that she's co-founded, I don't know what is. So I got to hear a preview of this session. You are in for a treat. Get your questions lined up and join me in welcoming Danny Johnson to the stage, who is led the career and research practice at Deloitte and previously led research at Ross School as well. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you, Val, so much for the introduction. I am very happy to be here today. It's always a good day when I get to talk a little bit about skills. And today is particularly interesting because we have some really kind of an amazing panel. Skills is interesting in that the appeal of skills sort of lies within their potential. What can we do with them? We started talking about skills probably about 6 years ago. And we've been diving just a little bit deeper every single year. One of the things that we noticed 6 years ago is that it really was sort of aspirational. The people that were doing it were those that had lots of money and access to data and lots of really good people that could understand that data. But a couple of things happened in the middle of that from 6 years ago. The first one was the pandemic. I think that really gave us an understanding of what could happen if we understood the skills in our organization as people that were no longer able to work because the pandemic shut them down, figuring out what they could do and move them to a different part of the organization so their job wasn't at risk, but also so business continued. The second thing that's happened is AI. I have to mention that in every conversation that I have. AI has simplified things. So skills data is complicated, and sort of making sure that it's giving us the information that we need is also very difficult without some of the things that we've seen with AI lately. And so those are two of the things that have happened that have made this more of a reality than it's ever been. And the power of skills, I think, is being able to understand what people can do on more of a micro level, because that allows us to put them in different places. We're no longer tied to just what we know about them from their career or their resume. We can take in information from the work that they're doing, the things that they know, and that provides us more flexibility for talent movement. It gives us opportunities to create stronger employee development opportunities for them. We can make things more equitable because we understand the skills, not just the things that we can see out loud, and also better workforce planning, which is becoming a bigger and bigger discussion. When we at Red Thread think about skills, we think about a skill strategy as having 6 fairly strong components. And those components sort of divide up into 2 or 3 bigger groups. The first component is scope and purpose. Understanding how big your skills initiative is and what the purpose is for it. Doing skills for skills' sake is stupid. It's really hard. And so unless you have a good reason and a good business case for doing it, we don't recommend you get into it. Second one is government and steering, making sure that the things that you're putting in place are understood and the way that the data is handled and moves from one place to the other has rules around it. The third is culture. It's really important to change the culture of your organization to absorb this idea of skills or skills initiative. Fourth is architecture, and kind of along with that goes to the number 5 one, which is data, architecture and data, understanding the level of which you need information on the skills and how that information moves around and how it's organized is a really big deal. And then the 6th is technology. This is almost impossible. We've talked to exactly one organization that is doing skills initiative without tech. By and large, you need tech. And the good news is that very many organizations, tech vendors, are sort of recognizing this and pulling in skills data and starting to use it a little bit better. So today we want to have a discussion. We want to have a discussion about what skills looks like now and what it can look like in the future. And we're really lucky to have just some excellent conversationalists on this. First, we have Vidya Krishnan, who is the CLO at Ericsson. She has lots of really deep expertise in skills strategies. They were actually one of the first people on our podcast that we talked to about skills and what they were doing. Vidya has been at Ericsson for a while, and she's bounced around in different areas of the company. So she has kind of lots of in-depth experience about what Ericsson looks like and how they can best serve that with skills. So she's the first one we're going to talk to. And then the second one in this conversation is Kendra Angier. She's the CHRO at CoreLogic. She's interesting in that they're kind of newer to skills, but they're approaching it in a really structured and disciplined way. which I think will be a fascinating sort of juxtaposition to what Vidya will tell us. She has the opposite experience of Vidya. She's been in several organizations, including Anderson Consulting and PepsiCo and Ingram Micro. And so she brings all that rich experience into developing the skill strategy effort that she's working on right now in CoreLogic. And with that, let's welcome them to the stage and get going. Hello.
Hi.
It's so good to have you both.
Thank you for having us. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. I want to start by just talking maybe a little bit about what an SBO is, a skills-based organization. Some people love that term. Some people hate that term. We're going to use it for the purposes of this conversation. But give me just a little bit of information about how you all are approaching it. Maybe we start with you, Kendra. How does CoreLogic define a skills-based organization? And why is that shift something that you're focusing on right now?
Yeah. So CoreLogic, just for background, CoreLogic is a property intelligence company. So we're, in a huge transformation phase as we look at a company that's traditionally been seen as a company that serves real estate and mortgage solutions to really being a data, insight, and intelligence company that's really fueling the entire property ecosystem. And what's interesting is if you think about data and the need for data centers. And so we have like location intelligence that a lot of big companies like Meta's, for example, are interested in our location intelligence data. So we're really transitioning from a kind of a transactional, kind of operational, kind of organization to insights, intelligence, and really being better partners for all of those people that serve the property system. So we're in a B2B type of a business. And I think for us, what's interesting with a skills-based organization is this is part of our transformational journey. So it's part of that change management initiative, Danny, that you shared. And we actually think that this is one, it's the currency for careers of the future. But it also gives us ways to be more transparent with our employees around the skills that matter most. And those could be competencies and they could be job skills. They could be sort of like a skill is a skill. It's kind of like, even that is hard to think about and we're trying to be disciplined and being very broad in how we look at skills. But those are really enablers to help us with our change and transformation. And they give us some common language, but it also gives us a view to how do we assess employees? How do we hire employees? And more importantly, how do we move employees so that they could have a robust career experience and we could really be a talent marketplace for our employee base.
So I love that. You mentioned a couple of things. The first thing that stood out to me is you said a skill is a skill, basically. Like, we don't care what you call it. A skill is, understanding what people can do. And I think that's key because we've been in discussions that just devolve into a skill and a competency and a capability and a behavior and all these types of things. What you're talking about is like a skill is a skill. It's a piece of data, helps us make better decisions about some of the other things, which was my second point. You're really hitting on some of those big things, talent mobility, making sure that you're hiring the right people. All of those are like really strong business cases for wanting some of this more discrete information. Very cool. Vidya, what about you?
I mean, I can't agree with Kendra more. First of all, Ericsson, we're 145 years old. We try not to act our age. We have 95,000 people in 180 countries who are constantly working to change themselves, but also change the world. We make networks. We make the solutions that power those networks. We make the applications and the interface for applications that can get value and innovation from those networks. So we create connections that make the unimaginable possible. And, you just follow the history of your own cell phone, right? 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. Technology is inherently upgradable. Nobody's satisfied with 3G. Everybody's ready for 5G and then 6G and 7G. Technology is inherently upgradable, and so are we. And I think that is what powers us to make skills-powered organizations a priority at Ericsson. We deserve this as a workforce. The future of work needs to work for everyone better than it has. So for us, a skills-powered organization is one in which we take a systematic approach, a really systematic approach to making sure that the people we have can become the people we need again and again and again. And what that means practically or tactically is that the way we learn, the way we screen people, the way we hire them, the way we actually recruit them, the way we have them navigate their careers when they're inside the company, and the way we plan our future workforce, which more and more is our future skills force. All of them have skills, just like was said, like it's what you can do. And they have skills as a knowable, measurable, changeable factor. And this is the best time to start. It's never too late. And I always say, whether you've been on this journey for a while or you're just starting the journey now, you're here at the exact right time. And sometimes the people who are starting the latest and the newest can go the fastest. But the key is that we're on that journey together, because I think this is what the world deserves from the future of work.
I like how you both mentioned the people aspect. A lot of times we think skills helps us be more efficient. It helps us get the right people in the right role. But both of you seem to have sort of and this shouldn't be surprising since you're both in sort of the people practices, but like an affinity to helping people get where they're going. It's not just about the business, but it's also about people. People is, as you mentioned, Vidya, a really important resource to our organizations. I'm a little bit interested though in the business side. So what's the role of your skills data in shaping your workforce strategy?
Yeah.
And maybe in other words, like how's it connecting to the broader business initiatives or objectives that your organizations have? And maybe we start with Kendra again.
Sure. And we're early on in our journey. And I will share, we've just completed a job architecture initiative this last year. So global job architecture, we have, I don't know, probably sounds like a lot, but let's just say like 16 or 18 job families and a bunch of sub-job families. But it's nice because we now have clear visibility globally of what type of people do we have and the type of roles that they're doing, et cetera. So skills to us is kind of that next, it's kind of that next kind of jumping off board for us. But I think what's interesting is if I had a magic wand, job description would go away, right? So if you think about kind of the traditional and where we've been and where we're going, and that's where I think like skills in some ways is kind of the new currency, because skills you can define and you can help people master those skill sets, but you can translate how to develop those skills on the job through experiences. And that experiential learning is so important, from the ground up all the way to, kind of more experienced leaders. And so I think for us with this workforce strategy pieces, we're changing at such a fast clip that we need to give people and take risks with some to give them the experiences to really accelerate their skills and their capabilities. And I would link it back to, because we're on this journey right now, we're being disciplined about defining the skills that we think are needed for the future. So the skills that we're focused on are the ones that we think today are the most important. And we'll continue to iterate. But I think that's the connection with skills and people are absolutely important. We're doing it in a way that's relevant to our business, but it creates, I think, infinite pathways for, so when we think about like, what is your career trajectory or your career kind of pathway, I think once you break all these skills down, it's like a kaleidoscope. And that's actually really exciting, I think, for us and for our employees too.
Vidya, what about you?
Again, I couldn't agree more. For so long, the definition of a career was this, sort of notion of a vertical ladder. And then it became a lattice. But now I think people understand it's a landscape, it's a kaleidoscope. It's up to you to connect the dots, and skills are the passport or the currency through which you connect them. And the role of skills for us, skills are a byproduct, quite frankly, of our strategy. Because if you have a strategy and you don't have the skills in your workforce to execute it, that's a daydream. But if you have a bunch of skills in your workforce that are not united and mobilized by a strategy, that's a nightmare. So for us, skills data is, I'm fond of saying this, but I think that skills are like oxygen. They're vital, but they're invisible. Data and analytics is what makes them visible. And when you see them, the key is you can connect skills to strategy. You can understand where you have the skills, the inventory. For so long, we would hire in our companies. And my colleague, Peter Shepard, likes to say we would throw away the receipt. We didn't know where the people and the skills we hired were. We couldn't find them again. And so the power of having a skills inventory acting like the supply of your company, this amazing, beautiful supply of people, lived experiences, experiential learning, interest, that's your supply. And then there's this demand, the strategic demand. That's the work to be done. And the faster a company and the more fluidly a company can mobilize people and skills and interests and opportunities to find one another, the better off we are, the more agility we have. So for us, skills data is skills intelligence. We use it in a very concrete way. We use it to do an annual thing called skill sensing. where we combine and compile looking around, looking within, looking beyond, what's the good and the bad and the ugly of skills inside our company. And we use that in partnership with our CTO and our group strategy team to decide, just like Kendra said, what are the vital few? What are the most important skills that we need to disproportionately focus on? And those are future skills. And that data is used to not only tell us the state of skills at any given moment in our team, but to really inform how we figure out what's emerging, what's eroding. Because that's what we want. We want people, naturally in a self-shaping way, moving away from eroding areas towards emerging areas. And the more we can equip them with skills intelligence to do it, the better off we are.
So I think, I think this is really interesting because a lot of these organizations that we talk to are trying to do exactly what you just finished, Kendra, which is align all the skills to all the jobs that you already have in your organization, which is basically using a structure that is sound and organized and well understood within the organization. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but both of you are talking as if you're trying to maybe even move beyond that. So this is good for today. A job description is good for today and a role is good for today, but where can that take us in the future? I was wondering if you could talk to that a little bit. And I know this isn't on our list of questions, but if you're comfortable, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
If I could go first, just to say what I really, really loved what Kendra said, that, you don't want to fixate on a job description because that's a moment in time. And especially now in the ascension of AI and everything else, and the ascension of, we hope, human intelligence, not just artificial intelligence, jobs and job descriptions and the things you need to do the job well is changing every day. And so it makes it so critical to have that dynamic, fluid way of being able to continually somewhat re-architect yourself and redescribe the job roles and re-qualify and decide what does the job role of tomorrow look like? Because we're not, I think you said it so beautifully, Kendra, we're building tomorrow's skills.
Yeah.
And we're not building tomorrow's skills today to do yesterday's job.
Yeah.
So having that be digitalized, our job architecture, quite frankly, used to look like, I used to say, I used to be so fond of receiving the IKEA catalog every winter and like thumbing through it. That used to be our job architecture. It was flat files with these beautiful descriptions that never really got updated more than once a couple of years. And we don't shop like that anymore. We know how we shop, right? We shop in a relational database that's constantly changing and reflecting. And I think that's heavy lifting, but that's what it does for the company when you can digitalize and simplify and make your job architecture more dynamic and automated. All you're doing is recognizing that, exactly what Kendra said, jobs are fluid and the workforce needs to be a bit more fluid too.
Yeah. I think maybe I'll just share just because I don't know, I won't get too tactical. And again, we're on this journey, but just for anybody that's kind of in this boat. So I think you mentioned technology as like the sixth of your six things, Danny. And I think it's funny because for some of us that use large ERPs that have these skills, things, and, like, oh, let's just turn it on. And then you just get garbage and there's like millions of gajillions and like these finite skills. And it's like, oh no, what do we do now? So we knew that we didn't want to do that. We don't know what we're doing, but we didn't want to do that, which is pretty funny. But I do think what's interesting is the way that we're looking at skills, and it's probably too much for now, but I think it will whittle down. So we're going through an iterative process, and I tell the organization, we're all like, we're going to get into the sand sieve together and we're going to shake it out. And then, the shells are going to kind of, they'll be apparent to us, but we're looking at kind of leadership, kind of core leadership skills, some core behavior, professional type skills, and then specific either job family or really specific functional skills. So, and we're trying to be disciplined and like, let's not have too many, but what does that look like? What's really fun is the functional skills are getting overshadowed by the professional and the higher level skills. And that's to me what I'm most excited about, because that's the leadership alignment around what's really important. And we all we've been around the block a couple of times. We've called these things different, in different, kind of in a different era, but like systems thinking. So you think about systems thinking as digital literacy. So now we're talking about, even like digital and data literacy, but that ability to really kind of look at a process and how do you optimize that process, but do it in a digital way? Because, how do you kind of automate and, And so it's interesting just to think in some cases, I'm like, gosh, back in the day, I would have called it this, but we're calling it this now, and that's okay. But then there's some other things that are, critical thinking, problem solving. Those are, decision-making quality. So now you have people that traditionally have been highly transactional that are now leveraging tools and systems that are giving them intelligence. It's like, do I trust this information or do I not? And it's kind of like the one thing that I'm like is fascinating is prompt generation. So what types of questions are you asking and what prompts are you using to get your intelligence and your insights? And how do you triangulate that in a way that really helps facilitate good decision quality so that you could be a consultant, a storyteller, an influencer, right? So I think net is every department and function is going through this process. And it's really fascinating to see how much commonality and the thread stringing through engineering, our operations and our call center, and even kind of our functions like finance and HR. So they show up differently in our jobs, but they are the same skill set. And this learning agility is, and the willingness to like jump in and try these new tools. And, that agility has always been important. And I think it's just as important, if not more important now as we're going through these changes.
Yeah. So I think this is interesting because you're both I don't want to say you're dancing around it, but as both of you are talking, like I heard in my head, everything's changed now with AI. Like that's why we can't land on maybe a job architecture that is going to be the same for ever. And so Kendra, you were talking specifically about like these higher level skills or these durable skills or whatever we're calling them these days, but they're basically like the human skills, the skills that we can't really rely on other ways of getting work done to get done, right? I was talking to Stephen Moran, who's the CLO at Bertelsmann, if you know Bertelsmann, a very large company with 80,000 employees. He said something interesting. He said, we're not focusing on developing skills that we think are going to be taken over by AI in the next couple of years. Like we're just not going to teach them anymore because we think that our time is better spent focusing, as Kendra was saying, on these very human things like this critical thinking or, whatever it is that the humans are still going to need to do in partnering with the technology. I'd love to understand from both of you a little bit. And again, this is a question that we did not discuss before, but I'd love to understand how AI is playing a role in the skills that you're choosing, as well as maybe the skills that you're not focusing on as much.
Maybe I can start by saying AI is not new to us. We have been on this AI journey for, in some sense, decades, but definitely in earnest with skill building for almost 6 years now. And I think the key with that is to know that it's never the same thing twice. It's like the river. You can never step in the same river twice. That's AI. And that's quite frankly, all technology. Our whole company started as a telegraph repair shop. So we've had to change quite a bit to become a 5G powerhouse. So on the one hand, that's not new. That the thing keeps changing and we need to create fluid, agile strategies and architectures that change with it. I fully agree with Kendra. We call them power skills. We choose to call them power skills, which are also called human skills because we say they either empower or disempower every other kind of skill you're going to have. And I think that's how I feel about AI. AI, generative AI, automation for us, that is definitely, huge among our critical skills. It's the one we started with. So whenever I tell people our skills journey, I say, we just started with one and it was that one because we didn't have to sell it to anyone. Everyone understood, that one's worth doing. And we built, if you can say, our framework around levels of qualification and how you qualify and the data and so forth around that. But that's not our only critical skill. And I think we still take the view that we need a mix of techno-commercial power skills, even skills of resilience and well-being. And here we take some guidance from the World Economic Forum. If you look at their 2030 list of the top 10 skills, AI is there. Networks and cybersecurity are there. But so is resilience. So is managing people. So is influencing and critical thinking. And so for us, it is very important to teach techno-commercial power skills and the skills of having integrity and well-being and being safe and so forth. Because for us, really, it's that mix that will make sure that artificial intelligence is not happening at the expense of human intelligence, but really to augment the two. And we need our people to be feeling that, AI is not happening to them, but through them.
I like that.
I'll just answer quickly. So we actually are partnering with a consultant to help us that has a robust skills taxonomy. So we did want to make sure that that's part of the discipline is like, let's start with a taxonomy. We have definitions and it makes it easier for us just to socialize that and get some consistency on what the vernacular is and alignment. That skills taxonomy, that data bank is actually it has AI built into it also, so that we can also ensure that there's relevancy for now and for the future. So I think that's actually been really important work for us to kind of pull that in, and that's part of going through that sieve also. But that was important for us that we had a good foundation to start with. That and again, it's robust. So I can only imagine like it's helpful to have the AI tool that can just help kind of synthesize and bring some of these things to light for us. I think if I could just share a vision, there might be some partners out there. So I should be aware what my vision is because I need help. But I love GPT. My team teases me. I love Perplexity. As I think about, kind of how and we use Copilot internally also. But as I think about like, I want a system that will say, hey, Kendra, you're here. And based on your skills and your interest and what all the other people in the organization are doing, these are your infinite possibilities. And if you want to, accelerate in here's the type of skills and experiences, and then feed me what I need. That doesn't sound that difficult. And then as an HR leader, I can look into say, who has these skills? Think about the talent marketplace is really almost an internal LinkedIn of all of these skill sets. So then we can use gigs, projects, right? Because a lot of our ERPs today are based on org hierarchy, which isn't really, it's helpful when it comes to like approvals and workflows, but that's not helpful when you think about talent mobility. So to really have this, kind of fluid system that helps us really identify and move and connect people in a way that's relevant is like, it's nirvana. I'm excited about it because I think that through AI and new tools that maybe we haven't seen or some new things that we'll create, that we'll be able to accelerate that. And then I've seen some questions come in. I'll just kind of give a plug for compensation. I think then we can start to see really interesting things around compensation for either critical skills, but more importantly for project-based work. And I think that's really, because then you can measure ROI and impact of projects. And then I think things start to get pretty exciting and different than our traditional annual merit cycles that have really not that great of budgets, right? Because we're so in any event, I think all of us, we're going to get there as an HR profession because that's where things are going. It's just a matter again of just trying different things and seeing what we can learn along the way. But that would be my nirvana.
No, it's really interesting. If I think about sort of implementing something like that, that's a massive tear up to the way that we do things today, which I feel like, we're kind of on the cusp of that, right? We're being forced into not paying attention so much to what Frederick William Taylor put into place like years and years ago, Winslow Taylor put into place years and years ago, but instead maybe rethinking how we get work done and how we compensate people and how we move people and what a career means and all that kind of stuff. It's
totally. And I think it's both and. I think the annual review and performance, I'm a traditionalist, that's important, but it's the and because we haven't really done the other pieces that I think are the stuff that's just cool and exciting and just really makes great experiences for our employees.
Let me ask you a question about showing value for some of these things you're doing to senior leaders. How are you maybe approaching that? Or is it even a problem?
I think there's always a need to create value and demonstrate value and make sure the value you create and demonstrate can be seen. I don't think that's ever going away. If anything, AI is only making that more apparent. Yeah. So I think the first thing is to simplify, right? Because sometimes you're trying to show, and this is a tendency we've always fallen into, and I personally fall into this. You want to show so much that nothing lands and nothing sticks. And so one of the things that for us was critical was to simplify measuring what matters. And we decided that when it came to skills, what really mattered was how many people have what level of skill in what, and is it the right number? And are they in the right place? Skill shift. We're going from this to this. Some people call it skill density. Like, hey, use it. At Ericsson, we would like 3 out of 4 people to be fluent in AI. That means level 1, 2, or 3. How far or close are we to that? in this team working on this deal, working on this technology, we think you need at least 2 out of 3 people who should be fluent in this, and 3 or 4 of them should be fluent in this, and at least 1 out of the 5 of you ought to be a level 4 in this. We found that that one thing turned out to be both very understandable. It was a winnable game because you can see the line and people say, that's a player scorecard. I can make that line better by building my skills and credentialing myself and getting on that scoreboard where the company sees me. And I think that demonstrates the value because, again, we first started small and we made one organization who was so willing to partner with us. They did such incredible things. In a 3-year period, they got 15,000 of their people credentialed in AI.
Wow.
And it was no surprise to anyone that the wins and the key deals and the revenue and the efficiency that they were generating, they were willing to correlate all of it to that. And that creates this company-wide sense of FOMO, right? Well, I want what they have. So I think for us, it was counterintuitive to really simplify showing value by just how many people have what level of skill. But now the second question that is occupying us every day is, so what? That's the supply. Show me how people are putting the skills to work. Mm-hmm. Show me that through exactly what Kendra said, mobility, talent fluidity, use cases that are getting done by people who are coming from other parts of the organization, and that the people with the highest level skills are actually demonstrably putting them to work in a talent marketplace where opportunities and skills can find each other. So for us, it was actually keeping it really simple, skill shift as an OKR.
Anything to add there, Kendra?
No, I love it. We're the output for us is mobility. We measure that. So we'd like to see 35% mobility across the organization, which would mean 1 in 3 people in any given time period have some sort of movement, expansion, whatever. And so we've kind of opened up our definitions to be pretty broad, but we're looking at that. And that's measurable because we can tie it to people, performance, length and role, like all that kind of stuff. But I actually like this idea of certification as a way just to create the groundswell and the focus. So we're actually looking at doing some AI, if you think about like AI maturity models, kind of the first 2 levels are really just getting people kind of trained. And even like I talked about this prompt writing, it seems silly, but actually having people apply the skill sets and using them and the tools that we're providing to them. So I think that's and it actually showcases to the employee base that you're serious or we're serious about that development and that transition.
We have several questions that we could talk about, but I also want to make sure that we get to some of the questions that some of you have submitted. And so we're going to go to a couple of those now. I think this is a good one. And I think you both can speak to this because you talked about those 20 skills or that one skill that organizations need. How do you identify what future skills are needed, both internally and externally informed by the market?
We call it skill sensing.
Okay.
If anybody follows the work of Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, this is slow thinking. It's the system 2 thinking, which means it's not the first thing that pops into your mind, because what we have found is when you ask people what skills matter most, they think mostly about gaps. But this is not what we're after. We are looking for strengths converted to superpowers that are going to help us monetize our strategy. And that skill sensing process is a system 2 deep thinking process where, again, it's fed by analytics telling us the good, the bad, the ugly of the current state within, looking around at the mega trends of what's emerging and eroding, and then looking beyond through the lens of our own strategy. Well, what are we trying to achieve? What is it that we're trying to monetize? And what kind of skills do we need to have in massive scalable quantity in order to monetize that? And so I really mean it when I say our skills are connected. They're almost a derivative of our corporate strategy. And that's why they go hand in glove. And that is the process high level that we use. And we come up with the vital few. We are big believers in the Pareto analysis, right? The vital few, there's a few, the 20% that governs, most of the outcomes. So for us, our critical skills are a single digit number, usually less than 7. And they are agnostic, unapologetically agnostic of your job role. We are telling you, if your badge says Ericsson, these are the skills that we need to have: speed, scale, and accountability in order to monetize our strategy. That's the process that we use to identify what they are. And we go through it every year. So our skills have, like a milk carton, they have an expiration date, and we keep refreshing them. Now, some of them stay because they should, but some of them come and go.
Kendra, what about you?
Well, that's why we started with the taxonomy and a partner, because I would say that would be like the skill sensing on steroids as a place to start. And then we're actually with every one of our executive leadership and their leaders. So we're thinking about like your executive team, -1, -2 levels as a starting point. We're facilitating intake sessions across the organization, and then we're going to compare across. So it seems like a daunting task. Like I said, it's actually going faster and smoother than I thought it would, which is great. And I think it is because we are aligned on our strategy and the things that are most important. And we just now have a tool with some consistent language and a partner that's holding us accountable. We said going into this, we want broad, not super deep. So kind of, help us manage that. So it's been a good project. But that, I don't know, I guess I would say depending on the size of your organization, if you have a big team, like a Vidya and a group that can do the skill sensing internally, awesome. If you don't and you want to accelerate it, look to a partner that has a tried and true taxonomy as a place to start.
One quick follow-up, because I think Kendra made such an important point. Who is doing the skill sensing? If I've given the impression that it's my team, that was a wrong impression. The skill sensing is being done by our business leaders with our people team and our chief strategy and chief technology officer. You could almost say they govern or they make the final call on our skill sensing. It's not us. I think that's been important. And I think it echoes what you said, Kendra. Like, skills are a product that the business need to own every bit as much, if not even more so, than the people in HR functions, because that product lives to execute the strategy. So that's important for us, that the skill sensing process is one in which it is those groups taking an active role and even having the final say.
Yeah, we had the pleasure of having Vidya and Peter Shepard, one of her coworkers, on our podcast a little bit ago, and they walked through what that structure looks like. So I can give this to Better Works, and they can point you to that. It's a fascinating setup, and one that I think is probably necessary. I think you're right. This cannot be an HR only owned initiative, or it will never go anywhere.
Yeah, fully agree.
Kind of diving in just a little bit. So you talked about a skills inventory, understanding what skills you have in your organization. And also when you switch them out, you know what I mean? Reggie, you said sometimes they stay on, sometimes they're swapped out for others. What signals, what skills signals, or what data streams are you looking at to determine some of that stuff?
It's just what Kendra said, credentials. So the process is simple. We do the skill sensing. We have 4 levels of skill across the whole company. We have different experiential journeys. We measure whether or not you have the skill based on your qualification through an assessment, meaning we really don't care if you complete something or not. We care if you qualify. You can take the test as many times as you want. The test is not a simple written multiple choice test. Sometimes they are hands-on simulations. Sometimes people are assessing your work product. But the key is you can fail 100 times until you pass, because that's a perfectly awesomely valid way of learning. Once you earn the qualification, we give you a digital credential. Then, therefore, the digital credential becomes the signal of how many people we have at what level in what skill. And that becomes very easy to, run metrics on and pull from and so forth. And it becomes part of an individual's skill signature. So that's the mechanism that we use.
Anything to add there, Kendra? How is your organization approaching that?
We're so early in the journey, I think, and I think Ericsson has done a nice job of, like, when it's all said and done, we might come back and say that, like, Lean Six Sigma has been something that we've been focused on right now, which is kind of probably the beginning phases to really looking at process optimization. And we have one part of our organization that's done exactly what Vidya's described. And I love this whole skill signature. Like, that's just totally cool. We're not there, but I think with some of the AI foundational training, that will be part of our strategy that will align in this year to embark on and complete next year in 2026. But I think that's where it's like, there's the skills and like what's important to be successful. And we talked about, like, the power skills, which is some of our leadership and our professional skills that are tied to our core values. And then I think, if there are some certain areas, AI being one of those, just foundationally, so that we're all on the same page, I think to actually have a sheep dip where everybody has some level of, kind of qualification or training it's a remarkable effort. So I think it's a great best practice to follow.
It sounds like you both have captured the imagination of your organizations, and that you have the backing that you need in order to take this forward. Tell me what success looks like. How are you demonstrating? I don't want to say ROI because I'm not sure that's the best measure, but how are you demonstrating that this is working?
For us, as I said, it's a system. It's not a program. So it means that every year, whether it's a good year or a bad year, no matter what's happening geopolitically, macroeconomically, the machine is working. There's skill sensing going on to tell us eroding versus emerging. We have 100,000 people who are shifting their skills measurably, qualifying every day. And the credentials are consequential, meaning because they have those credentials, they are getting opportunities. Even if their job role is 80% or it's their base, they're still able to take 10%, 20% of their bandwidth and apply it to projects and opportunities on a project marketplace based on skills. And they're getting that opportunity to grow, and our people grow, and therefore we grow. For me, that system running again and again is what great looks like, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
I think and we're going to end there because Val is on to tell me to shut up. But I think that right there is a really important point. Vijay, you're not talking about a skills initiative. You're talking about a skills system. Like all the things run off this. It's not something that needs to be justified because it's part of the system that's in place. That's awesome. Thank you both, Vijay and Kendra, for being here.
I am the music equivalent of the music playing at the Oscars as an award acceptance speech is taking place. And so thank you, Kendra, Vidya, and Danny for an incredible conversation. This just proves to me the value of bringing people together, even if you're at different phases of a journey, even if you're in different industries, and just sharing your stories because it's so powerful and everyone has learned so much. So thank you all. We're now going to hear from John Schneider in the final session wrap. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.